Welcome back for a coast-to-coast new episode of E&P Reports, the official podcast from the staff of Editor and Publisher Magazine. I'm your host, Bob Andelman. This week, we bring you another fresh conversation with an industry leader and challenge you to once more look at news publishing with fresh eyes. Today, Dean Ridings, the new CEO of America's Newspapers, an organization that resulted from the combination of the Inland Press Association and the Southern Newspaper Publishers Association, talks to editor and publisher, editor-in-chief, New Yang. Ridings shares his thoughts on how America's newspapers will strengthen local journalism, where the news publishing industry is heading, and why newspapers are still an important part of the industry's brand and mission. New?
Hi, Dean. Thanks for joining me here today on E&P Reports. And congratulations on your new position at America's Newspapers. How's it going so far?
It's going great, and good afternoon to you. The first few weeks have been very good. I've gotten to know the staff. It's a great team. I'm really looking forward to working with them. I've met a few of the board members. I'm looking forward to meeting the rest of them at the mega conference in a couple of months. And of course, we have a great membership across the country. So it's the first couple of weeks are going well.
Great. So for people not familiar with you, what's your background? And were you familiar with S&P Inland before the merger and their search for a new CEO?
You know, I was familiar with both SNPA and Inland. They both have great reputations, so I knew of both of them and had attended a few meetings in the past. My background, though, was at the Florida Press Association in Florida. We had an office in Orlando and in Tallahassee. And I've been with them for about 2 decades and was involved in running that organization and its advertising agency, Intersect Media Solutions.
Mm-hmm. And you're still based in Florida, correct? You're kind of working remotely then?
Yes, yeah. Florida, our focus was strictly in Florida.
Okay. And did you have any kind of newspaper background before you were in charge of the Florida Press Association, or?
Yes, in fact, I was publisher for about 15 years before I joined the Florida Press Association, worked at different papers, mainly across the South.
Mm-hmm. I can tell by your accent, right? So.
Yes, you can tell I have some history in the South, can't you?
Yeah. So what was the process like about the interview process? How did you hear about the position? What were they looking for? And, what attracted you to the position?
Well, I had seen the stories about the merger from E&P and other locations. And so I was aware of the merger, and I knew that they were looking for a CEO. I didn't think about it for myself. I really loved what I was doing and was very happy there and had a great group of people whom I worked with. So I didn't think of myself as a candidate. And, I got an email from the search firm asking if I could set up a time to talk with them about some possible candidates. So I had a conversation with them. They wanted to know if I had some names I could give. I gave them a few suggestions. And then at the end of the call, they said, well, what about you? What about putting your name in that? And I said, well, thank you. I'm honored, but I don't think so. I'm pretty happy here in Florida. And he asked me if I would think it over. And I said, well, sure. Give me a couple days. And I did. And the more I thought about it, the more interested I became. It seemed like such a great opportunity. The Inland and SNPA had such great reputations. Thinking about them coming together and creating this great organization was just too tempting. So I did put my name in the hat.
Great. So you weren't really looking to for a new job, basically. The idea just came to you. And so what kind of prompted you? You were saying, there was a position kind of, you were really curious about the position, so you decided to pursue it, or what was that thought process like, especially being at a position for 2 decades and to move to a new job?
Well, with the ad agency, the position I had was really interesting and always changing, as our business is, as you know well. But the thought of being able to face some challenges and hit them on a national level was extremely appealing to me. We have found that we've changed some legislation in Florida, and it's been very effective and made things better for our members. But it would have been better if we could have done it on a national basis. And the thought of being able to replicate solutions on a national level is just that really excites me. So that was one of the main things.
that was what was attractive, was that national platform. You're kind of taking something, all the work you did on a state level, but then taking what you learned and applied all these years to a national level. Then that's what was attractive to you, or?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. Because scale is important, and being able to, I'll give you an example. Public notice is very important to our democracy, and it's important to our members. It's still important revenue. So being able to look at a solution in Florida, which we did, has been very helpful. It's been good for the Florida citizens in getting the information. It's been good for our newspapers. But we could only go so far because we really needed a solution that's more national. So that's an example of something that I think America's newspapers can have an impact on.
Okay. So I guess if you want to talk to so what exactly does the CEO of America's newspapers do? What are some responsibilities that you have right now on your plate?
Well, it's obviously to fulfill the goals of the board of directors and to make sure that the organization is achieving its mission. I think it's also to come up with creative solutions for our members. So, there's that dynamic balance between staff direction and coming up with new ideas, which I think we expect to do, and then having a good ear open to our membership, making sure that we know what they need as our business continues to change. We need to change with it. And of course, the board of directors, their goal is to make sure that we're on task, that we're achieving our goals overall, the overarching goals of the organization, and marching forward.
Okay. Now, you came on officially, when is it that you officially came on as CEO?
November 11th. So
November. Okay. So about a month before that, early October, was when America's Newspapers was revealed in Chicago at their inaugural meeting. Right. So what was that like? Were you there as well at that meeting?
I was not there. I had many phone calls with people who were there. It's funny, the day before the meeting started, the board met, and that's when they approved me as their new CEO.
Oh, okay. So that was really quick then. It seems like, they went right to here's a new name, here's a new CEO.
That's right.
Yeah. So, I guess but you weren't there physically, but what was it like hearing from other people to, when they finally gathered as one organization, the merger is finally complete, they had a new name, they have a new CEO now. What's it like being, S&P Inland is now merged into America's Newspapers?
I've experienced a lot of enthusiasm. I think that people are very optimistic. They know that our industry has challenges, but that we have such a great opportunity. We just, we're not the only industry being disrupted. We need to think differently. We need to continue to evolve. And America's Newspapers is a culmination of that type of thinking. It made so much more sense to merge the two organizations. America's Newspapers can be so much stronger by having that broad platform across the country. So I think everyone has felt that. Everyone's been very excited and very optimistic that it's the right thing to do, and it's the right time for it.
That kind of goes into my next question and topic is, so what is exactly is the purpose and the goal of the new America's Newspapers? S&P and Inland have their own kind of associations and goals and missions. Well, what does it look like together as one group?
Sure. Well, we want to be true to the tradition and legacy of both organizations. There are things that they both did well, and we want to pay attention to that and continue those. But we also want to make sure that we do continue to evolve. And I think the mega conference is a great example of that. That's really become the industry conference that people have to attend. I think that, it's a partnership with Local Media Association and News Media Alliance, which we really value. That's good thinking. That makes sense. I think we're all stronger together.
Great. Now, there's other groups like you mentioned, News Media Alliance. We've seen them recently kind of, going to Washington, D.C., taking it on Facebook and Google. Do you see America's Newspapers kind of taking that same kind of stance on certain topics and projects? And what kind of changes do you want to target as CEO that America's Newspapers can be an ally in?
Anything that's of interest to our newspapers are of interest to us. Public notice is still very important to our democracy. Newspapers still provide the best way to communicate that information to the public. and that revenue is very important. So that's going to continue to be a focus. I think public notice, but whether it's reporters access, tariffs on newsprint, anything that would affect one of our members, we're going to pay attention to. And I think that will be an evolving part of our organization. Historically, SNPA and Inland were not lobbying organizations or advocacy organizations on the legislative side. And while that's not our primary goal, I think there's a place for us to work with the News Media Alliance to further the goals of our members. So I think there's a place for us there to make a difference.
And I feel like with your own background, being a publisher and being, the Florida Press Association, you're kind of are still connected and you have your finger on like challenges that they're still going through, correct? Even though you're not physically in a newsroom, you still understand what's going on with the members, correct? Is that kind of like what you're kind of figuring out, topics and challenges that people are going through?
I think so. We continue to pay attention to any pending legislation. We stay close to the membership to understand what they need, and things are a little different than they were 10 years ago and 20 years ago. But I think it is certainly the function of an association to stay close to their members so they know what is important. And I think it makes it a little easier for me having a newspaper background. I do understand some of the intricacies, but we have to stay current. We have to continue to monitor as things continue to change.
Yeah. So what are some of the benefits to members now? I know before the relaunch, I know SNPA Inland made a mission to kind of communicate. Communication was a big part of their mission of this merger, about the changes and everything. But what are some of the benefits to the members, and how would America's newspapers be a resource to the news industry as a whole?
Well, I'm glad you bring up communications. That's really central to us. We want to be the primary resource for newspapers and information about newspapers. And I think, I'm very proud to be part of this organization. The staff has been doing a great job in the past, and we're very focused on that. So whether, there's a place for us to provide that. Of course, E&P has its own role with communication. But I think we can work together to make sure that our members know what's going on. I think another area that's very important is networking, education. So whether it's the mega conference, our annual meeting, executive voices, I think these are very important. And I really believe that part of our job is to make sure that people remember what we do is important and it's still fun. And I think it's important for people to come to our meetings and become recharged. I want them to gain a renewed enthusiasm. We can create a place for them to come together, meet their friends, meet new friends, talk with their peers about common issues, and find solutions together. So that's a very important role that we will continue to play. Of course, I mentioned a minute ago, we also think that there's a place for us to assist on the advocacy on a grassroots level. When you look at our membership across the country, we have a great network, whether it's in Wichita, Kansas, or in Tallahassee, Florida, or Atlanta, Georgia. We have publishers who can talk with their own legislators. We can make a change. We can influence things.
And it's kind of you mentioned the combination of the NCPA and Inland coming one, but tapping into both resources now. They're able to kind of reach across the board and to use those resources and use the members. So in a way, like you mentioned, it's stronger and better because of that.
Much stronger. No, there's no question.
Okay. I also want to talk about the name America's Newspapers. I'm not sure. I mean, you came on later, so you probably didn't have any say as the name of America's Newspapers, of how they chose it. But one thing I know is that you guys kept the name paper in the new name, despite many other organizations kind of shying away from using the word paper in their name. So was that intentional? And do you see America's Newspapers ever opening up membership to digital outlets, to other platforms like magazines? So why is the word newspapers and paper so important to your new brand?
Well, I was not there when they selected the name, but I have learned of the process, and I understand there was a lot of discussion, as there should be, whether or not to include that in the name. I will tell you, I think it's fantastic. I love newspapers and I read newspapers every day. I happen to read my newspaper on my phone. And I think a newspaper the term newspaper is very descriptive of our business. Whether it's a newspaper in print or on a phone or on my computer, it's still a newspaper. And I think sometimes we're scared to use that word because we think it refers to only the legacy.
It's like old school. Yeah, it's old school kind of.
But it's a newspaper is very descriptive. If you tell someone newspaper, and if you ask people how they read their newspaper, they'll often tell you, well, I read it on my phone or I read it on my computer, but it's still a newspaper. So I think it's good. I think I'm proud that we're using the term newspaper, and I think it makes sense. And when you look at our membership, I think it's still descriptive, and there are some who the term will resonate even more with, but it works.
Okay. And how about as far as perhaps even opening up to digital outlets or magazines, or what about even opening it to international markets for America's newspapers to apply to those international publications perhaps, or did you see each other sticking to America's newspapers or into the United States?
Well, to answer the first part of your question, I think we are interested in reaching out to anyone who is in the local news media business. Whether it's a printed newspaper or a digital first effort, we're doing the same thing. So I think there's a place for anyone who is in that space to be part of America's newspapers. As to expanding beyond the U.S., time will tell.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
And you've been talking about mega conference, for a little bit now. So now that's kind of in February in Fort Worth, Texas. Have you attended before, and what are you looking forward to? This is the first one where America's newspapers would be there as the new association. So what's that been like, planning that and being a part of that process?
Well, I have attended before. It has been the must-attend event for our industry. So I've been to most the last few years. I am particularly looking forward to we have a session on women in leadership. I think that's very timely. I think it's very appropriate. I like the sound of that. There are other sessions that look good. I also think when you look at our exhibit hall, it's a really perfect climate and ideal environment to find out all the opportunities to build new revenue streams, to save expenses. So, it's a great location to be able to go into that hall and just to meet everyone in one location without having to travel around the country and then talk to your peers. How do you like this resource? So I think that's important as well. On a personal level, I've got to tell you, I love seeing my friends in the industry. I always look forward to that. Those hallway conversations are meaningful. I love comparing notes and again, like we talked about earlier, feeling the pulse of what's going on. That's very important.
Now, is there a difference between being behind the scenes as opposed to just being an attendee? Now that you're kind of in the behind the scenes on planning it as opposed to just attending it.
It is. I probably won't be quite as relaxed as when I've been in past years.
Kind of waiting around the halls, in Texas. And
That's right. And I'll probably pay more attention to make sure there's plenty of coffee.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to talk about, the creation of America's newspapers is due to mergers, and with Gannett and Gay House just officially merging, recently. Do you see more of these mergers and consolidations? Do you think that's where the industry is heading? Now you're part of one as well. Do you kind of see that's where it's heading, the industry, seeing more of these mergers and consolidations? But speaking to you, it seems like there's more strengths and benefits from that. But what are your feelings on that?
The answer is yes and no.
Okay.
I think we will definitely see increased mergers with some of our large groups because there is advantage to scale. There's no question. So Gannett and Gatehouse are taking advantage of scale. They'll be able to reduce some duplicated expenses. You can do some things on a larger scale that make more sense. So I think we'll see more of that. I won't say who, I don't know, but I think we'll see more merger. But at the same time, I'll certainly speak to Florida, and I think it's representative of the rest of the country. Seeing a lot of new newspapers being created.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And most of them are being created by individuals who live in a community and says, hey, there's an opportunity here. I don't think there's enough news about our city council or about our local parade or whatever it is. And we're seeing those pop up across Florida and I think across the country. So I think the family-owned newspaper will be around, and I think we're probably going to see an increase of those. You know, if you look back, some of this is cyclical, and I think we will continue to see some of these cycles repeat. But I think you're going to see more family owners, as well as I think there will be, ultimately in the next couple of years, there will be 2, 3, 4 major groups, and then a lot of family owners.
That's interesting, yeah, because I mean, one of the things, I mean, being part of our association is I'm seeing a lot of them losing memberships because of these closures and mergers, but you're seeing the opposite, where people are actually creating more publications and newspapers, correct? Is that what you're saying? Or
yes, you know, and again, I'll speak to our own anecdotal evidence in Florida. We have had quite a few new news organizations formed. A lot of them are digital first, but there are printed papers as well that are new. And I think there are still opportunities in print, and there are still opportunities for providing good local news and information, whatever the platform is. Okay. So I think we'll continue to see new products being created.
Okay. Now, as for America's Newspapers and yourself, so what's next for you and America's Newspapers? And you've been in this position just a couple of weeks now, but where do you see it heading now?
Well, it's a great time. You know, I think there's, first of all, we have a great climate because our members are expecting and wanting to be part of a change. So that's a good climate for us. You know, when I look back in the last couple decades, there's not been any significant success in a national newspaper promotion. I think that's a huge opportunity that America's Newspapers will step into. You know, stay tuned. We'll give you more details in the next couple of months, and I hope you all at E&P can be part of that. But I think we need that. We need a strong newspaper promotion, and America's Newspapers is positioned to do that. I think probably better than anyone else. So that's one thing that's high on my radar. But you know, there's a lot of good opportunities. I feel like the merger creates new opportunities and new enthusiasm and a new receptivity for new ideas.
That's great. And I'm glad you brought up marketing, bro, because it feels like that's what the industry is missing, is having that advocate, having that marketing and brand who's going to step up and be the voice of the industry as a whole. And it feels like America's Newspapers, that's where it's heading. That's your plan for it, your mission for it. So
yes,
that's great. Yes. Great. Well, I'm excited to see where America's Newspapers is heading and where you're going to lead them as a CEO. So I'm just going to say thank you for joining me here in E&P Reports, Gene. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. I've enjoyed speaking with you.
Thank you, New. Well, that wraps up this week's edition of E&P Reports, the official podcast of Editor and Publisher Magazine. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and please share it with a friend or a whole bunch of friends on social media. And please subscribe to us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you watch or listen to your favorite podcast. And if you'd like to rate and review the show, well, we'd sure appreciate that, too. I'm your effervescent host, Bob Andelman, saying thanks for watching, thanks for listening. And please consider checking out my other podcast, Mr. Media Interviews, now in its 13th year at mrmedia.com. That's mrmedia.com. Let's talk, edit, and publish again next week.